And the Canadian Grand Prix is underway.
Hey, I'm Serenity. Welcome back to my kitchen and welcome to another episode of Pit Stop Sweets and Treats. Let's get our apron on. This week's pit stop is in Canada for round 10, the Canadian Grand Prix, Montreal to be specific. We're going to make an authentic dessert inspired by our hosting country, and this is actually going to be a Quebec dessert, specifically the French part of Canada. We are making pudding chamour. Hopefully I'm saying that right. It's French. If I've learned anything doing this series for 2 years now, I need to work on my French. So I'm going to go pencil that in after this. Start working on my French. Basically, it seems like it's like a bread pudding dessert with like a syrup or sticky date pudding dessert, but it just uses maple syrup. So we're going to go over here to our stove to make our caramel while we learn about the history of the dessert. We're going to use both 3/4 cup of dark maple syrup followed by 3/4 of a cup of heavy whipping cream. And we are just going to bring this to a boil and then turn off the heat and it should be done. So I'm going to whisk it together. But this Quebec dessert is known as a poor man's pudding, or more literally translate to pudding of the unemployed. Love that. For its simple ingredients and rich flavor. The legend of this dessert's origins stems from the Great Depression, when homemakers had very few ingredients and needed to make something sweet. At first, the caramel sauce was actually made with brown sugar during economic hard times. If you don't know, brown sugar is just granulated sugar with molasses, so it's very easy to make at home. And maple syrup is expensive, but it has now been replaced with Canada's liquid gold, which is maple syrup. The dessert used French cooking techniques and changed to adapt to Canadian resources. I'm gonna be so for real with you guys. It looks like a dirty soda. If you know what that is, like when you put coffee creamer in your soda, you know what I mean? That's what that looks like. We are just gonna continue bringing this to a boil, babes. Low and slow. Okay, we're at a rolling boil, so I'm gonna turn this off. Take it off the heat over here, and I'm just gonna leave that there. It's pretty watery still. So we are back over here. Our caramel, don't know what that is, but our caramel is resting. So we're gonna start on the dough while we talk about some track histories and facts. We're gonna start by mixing together 1 cup of granulated sugar with 2/3 cup of softened butter. And we're going to beat this until smooth using an electric mixer. The first Canadian Grand Prix was held here in Canada, in this specific Canadian track in 1978. So it's been there for about 47 years, if that's the correct math. And it is on one of the islands of St. Lawrence River in Montreal, but has been part of the F1 calendar since 1967, just at different locations. There has been a Canadian Grand Prix for a lot longer. At first, the race would alternate between a track near Toronto on the opposite side of Canada called Motorsport Park in the primarily English-speaking part of the country. If you didn't know, Canada's 2 main languages spoken. Of course, there are the Aboriginal languages and other languages people speak, but the 2 main ones are English and French because Quebec was colonized by the French. A whole other story we're not getting into right now. That part of Canada was where the race was held, and then it was then held in Montreal at the Circuit Mont-Tremblant before the St. Lawrence River track was created after a previous track ran into financial trouble. And now we have this like little floating island track where everyone has to come in through kind of like boat or over a water bridge. So our butter is smooth. We're going to add, I have no idea why the lighting just changed significantly right now. I will try to fix it. Anyways, 2 eggs. And beat this again until, as you should know, this is the home race of Lance Stroll, who we will be talking about, don't worry, later on, but this is his home race. Quick facts, the circuit is 4.361 kilometers in length and has a total of 70 laps. When the race is complete, the drivers will have traveled 305.27 kilometers in distance. The current lap record is held by Valtteri Bottas from his 2019 lap at 1 minute 13 seconds, 0.078 hundredths of a second. Our eggs are nice and incorporated, so we're going to add 2 cups of flour along with 1 teaspoon of baking powder and a generous pinch of salt. And we're going to beat this till smooth again. This is nice and smooth, and it is a dough consistency, and it tastes like a basic dough or a sugar cookie. This is now going to go sit in the fridge for 10 minutes while we work on buttering our dishes. So it says to use ramekins, and I did not read that far ahead in this recipe. I apologize. I don't own any ramekins. I should. But I do have these springform little heart hands that are 4 inches, which is about the size of a ramekin. So we're going to be using these because this is what I have. It was this or a cake pan, if I'm being honest. So we're going to, well, get in there with butter. While we talk about this week's news, so there are 2 main stories I wanted to discuss this week, and that is Stroll and the 2026 F1 calendar. We found out before the Spanish Grand Prix that he would not be participating in the Grand Prix because he was undergoing surgery after immense pain for a while. If you don't know, Lance Stroll broke both his wrists and I think an ankle or something a couple years ago, and he had surgery and he was back in that car immediately with 2 broken wrists. But to have major surgery and jump back 2 weeks later in a car when I know you're not fixed from that surgery is extremely dangerous. Now, there are certain surgeries, particularly I'm thinking knee surgeries, where you can bounce back and you should be back to normal activity within a week. But this Lance Stroll speaks to this conversation that we've been having of to what point do drivers' safety not matter, if that makes sense? Jack Doohan driving with a concussion, drivers being treated after, was it Abu Dhabi or Dubai? One of them, one of those races. Most of the time, they can't even drink the electrolyte drink in their car because it's gross and it's hot. These are conversations we need to be having. And I think Stroll being the, center point, case point of this situation is interesting because, yes, his dad owns his team. And yes, he is a Nepo baby because most likely he wouldn't be in that position if his dad didn't own his team. But there also is, you need to acknowledge that no one would go through that if they weren't willing to get better and they didn't truly love this sport. Well, obviously wants to be an F1 driver. Is he the best one out there? I don't think so. I don't think anyone thinks so. But he constantly puts in work. And if the driver whose dad owns the team and can't even take adequate one race, just this race, sit out on this race, because then it would have been like 3 weeks of post-op, that shows how we expect perfection from these drivers. And don't think down the line in like 5-10 years when he's no longer in the sport, how that's going to affect him. I've broken both my ankles, my wrists, dislocated every major joint in my body. I currently have a broken toe and I've had surgery on multiple body parts to fix them. You do not bounce back that quickly. Especially, and I think he does have pins in his wrist. So if it was just tightening the pins, yeah, he could probably bounce back in a week, but that is, I can't imagine. And then we're not even talking about physical therapy. Okay, I am going to put our ramekins on a little baking sheet that are now buttered, and we're going to fill the bottom of each with this caramel sauce. It's not really like a caramel, guys, if I'm being honest, to cover the bottom. Okay, now we're going to take our chilled dough and put it into all of them. Okay, and the next thing I wanted to talk about was the 2026 F1 calendar dropped, and one key thing stood out to a lot of people. And yes, was I already planning what races to go to? Yes, even though I don't know what race I will hopefully go to this year yet. But the main point I saw a lot of people discuss, and I agree with, is the fact that Montreal, this Canadian Grand Prix, is going to be the same exact weekend as IndyCar. Now, why is this important? You're wondering, why are people freaking out over this? Because Monaco was the same weekend as IndyCar this year. Let me explain something. As an American, this fact will probably be staggering to you. 1 in every 1,100 Americans is going to be at IndyCar. It is the most attended race by Americans. Even if you don't love IndyCar and you just like motorsports, namely if you just like F1, you're going to probably go to IndyCar because you're going to see the reserve drivers. So I'm also going to push these down. And IndyCar is extremely accessible because tickets start at about $15. I'm not going to lie, I was looking to go next year too because I've been to Indiana myself. I've been to the track. I'm very familiar with it. And it's extremely accessible. So when you pile in, knowing that, we're going to pour the rest of the maple over top till it covers. It looks like mashed potatoes and gravy. So you learn that. Now, Monaco was the same weekend as IndyCar, and last year was similar too, I think. And another F1 race was the same weekend. The difference of why it's so important is because the races are going to start at the exact same time or around the same hour. So this year, IndyCar started at around noon Mountain Time. And if I'm going off of the Canadian race, that's also starting at noon Mountain Time. The races are going to be running simultaneously. Also, East Coast Americans who live on the East Coast, New York, Maine, New England, all those, they usually attend Montreal the Grand Prix because it's a couple hours drive away compared to going to Miami or coming down to Texas or going to Las Vegas. So F1, particularly putting it on that weekend, is battling for Americans to choose between Montreal, Canada, and the Indy 500. They're purposely making you choose between the two sports. That's why it's a big deal. And it's not even like I'm going to go attend Montreal, Canada, and then I'll have time to watch IndyCar. They're going on at the same time. You can't focus on both at the same time. That's the issue. Okay, the caramel is definitely spilling out, and that is my fault, but we're gonna have to go with it. These are gonna bake in the oven at 400 degrees for 20 minutes. So that is why people are so upset. I think rightfully so. Also, putting the Miami Grand Prix and then the Canada Grand Prix like back to back is a choice. Again, because it's going to be Americans choosing to have to go between both. You know what I mean? That's odd. And I don't want to put everything centered around America. I'm just saying specifically to IndyCar, that is super odd because people all over the world watch it too. So while we are waiting for that to bake, we are going to start on our whipped cream. That is going to go on top of our little puddings while we talk about feminism and the hosting country. We're just going to be making a basic whipped cream to go on top. So it's just going to be heavy cream, powdered sugar, and vanilla for taste. Nothing fancy. So in a medium-sized little bowl, I'm going to add 1 cup of heavy whipping cream. That is nice. And we're just going to beat this with cold whisk attachments until it is nice and stiff. Our cream has doubled in size. So now we're going to add 1/3 cup of powdered sugar along with a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And we're going to beat this until stiff peaks form. Our whipped cream is done, so I'm going to set it aside until we need it. So it's time to get a little dark, which should not be a surprise if you are a woman. I'm reading this book called Faster, and I know I said I'd be done with it, but I'm currently also doing my summer reading list of books I couldn't get to during the school semester. So I'm reading it pretty slowly. Anyways, it's basically about sports tourism and how sports is used to cover up horrendous things happening in certain countries. So you look at this pretty shiny thing instead of the atrocities happening. A quick example is ICE raids in the US and stripping away families, and the FIFA World Cup that's going to be held here next year. And no one is addressing that. Also, my degree is in women, gender, and sexuality studies. So I thought it'd be interesting to bring my educational background into this series and talk about this to give some sort of insight. So Canada as a whole has a lot of history, but we are just going to be focusing on the 4 waves. And then next year, we will talk about some of the important historic figures. Like both Australia and the United States and a couple of countries I assume when we get into Europe, the waves are very similar to each other. A lot of the same things happened because they were influenced by each other. Some of these points may feel regurgitated. So the first wave began in the 19th century, but it is worth noting before time was being counted, the Aboriginals were exploring equality in their own way with women having voices of their own. So Aboriginals, the original people of Canada, who often are cast aside, they had their own version of feminism, and they still do. So from the mid-19th century to the beginning of the 20th century, the first wave began, and it was focused on subjects like married women's property rights, child custody, and citizenship, and it was known as the materialist feminism, wanting women to be seen as the mother of the nation and be trusted with like childcare and such. The most prominent first-wave feminists were known as the Famous Five, which include Emily Murphy, Harriet Edwards, Nellie McClung, Louise McKinney, and Irene Parbley. While the first wave was responsible for giving women the right to vote, it was focused on white women only, and it is not so far to say you cannot separate the first wave feminism from nationalism, eugenics, and racism, and also pushing white identities. The second wave was from 1930 to 1980, and it is known for the women movement, but again, it is not inclusive, and it was spearheaded by white women who got what they want, and people of color voices were kind of tossed to the back. So intersectionality was completely ignored. An Indigenous Canadian feminist named Lee Miracle criticized this wave for the emphasis on just equality and not recognizing that everyone contributes to society equally, but in different ways. Our puddings are done. I did put them on another baking sheet because they were pooling. So I'm going to flip 2 over on a separate little plate. Go with the 2 biggest ones. These are hot, so I'm going to be careful. Try to get the top off. Oh no, it's falling apart. Oh my god, it's falling apart. Okay, we're just gonna keep the top off and bottom on it, I guess. The 90s were seen as the third wave, and it worked to be inclusive for everyone to fix what harm the second wave had created. And this is when we get the term intersectionality, but still white women, specifically in the North America, and their experience remained at the center. The fourth wave is what we are at now. It started between 2008 and 2012, and is known for the Me Too movement, and it is criticized for two main things: excluding sex workers and intersectionality of all identities, and also hashtag activism, where everything is for show online and not doing any real life work. So as you can see, like I said, Canada and America and Australia kind of have the same history, so to speak, but with different main points. Canada is ranked 36 out of 146 on the Global Gender Gap Index. I'm going to top with a little whipped cream, and let's go ahead and try her. Guys, I'm scared. Hold on, I need another taste. I'm sorry, the sun is going down, but I'm gonna be so honest. I'm not actually sure what I would rate this because it just tastes like a butter cake with like a maple element to it, and it's crunchy on the edges. So to me, it's okay. I'll give it a 5.5 out of 10. North American beavers, because Canadians are known for their beavers. There's nothing really special about it, and I wonder if it's because of the maple syrup that drooped out, but I mean, it's okay. It's just okay. I'm sorry. So let's quickly get into race predictions. I've only seen FP1 and FP2 at the time of filming this, so I have no idea what the starting grid is, but you're probably gonna get annoyed at my predictions, but I do have favorites, okay? So I need Williams in the top 10. They're looking strong. They're looking good. I can't wait for them to soon in a couple years be fighting for championships and wins. A McLaren double podium again, and I want Claire up there too, but I don't know if that's gonna happen because of Fred Visser when he said that the car is like messed up. To round out this episode, let's do meme of the week. The memes were not that good this week. I'm sorry, y'all. They were not great over the off week, but I do have one video to react to that I'm now going to be using as a meme.
What do you take away from these last three races?
Suffering.
Oh, Toto always gives us a meme. Okay, and then I also have these memes, the Fred Visser ones. That man is too cool for me. That is all I have for you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already to join me for the rest of this calendar. We're not even halfway done yet. All my socials are linked down below. Follow me if you want. And I will see you in a couple weeks for the Austria Grand Prix. Bye!
And it's lights out and away.